Hi, how are you this afternoon? My name is Dan, and on this video we will be working on a 2016 Land Rover LR4. We will be changing out the front and rear brake pads and rotors and bleeding out the brake fluid and changing that out. So the reason I make these videos is because even though there's many other brake videos out there for Land Rovers and LR4s, I am still not finding the information that some people need to do the project correctly when they come back and do it again in 2 years. This is the third time I've done the brakes on an LR4, and there are things in here that are unique to just this vehicle, and there's tricks and tips along the way. I hope you enjoy it, and there will be an index coming up next. Use that index and the slider at the bottom to jump to the parts that you want to see in particular. I hope this helps. Well, good morning. Let's get started. So the very first thing we need to do is jack the vehicle up and take the wheels off. I'm going to assume that you know how to properly jack up a Land Rover and put jack stands underneath. If you don't know exactly where those jack stands go or where the jacking points are, I have another video out there. Please take a look at that and come on back. This is very important. Please do it safely. Well, good morning, and let's get started. So here we are in the garage. We have the 2013 behind me, the 2016 here that we're working on today. And here we are. We're on the passenger side and we're in the back. So just a few quick words as we get started. So if you are watching this, you have probably been doing brakes your whole life and you've just picked up a used Rover and you just want to get the details on these Rovers. First thing to understand with Rovers, and you will come to learn, is that every one of these vehicles is a unique individual because they all seem to be manufactured with whatever was laying around on the shop floor that day. It can be very challenging. So all the torques that I'm giving you are from the manual, and all the tool specifications I'm giving you are from what we're finding here right in front of us. And if that's different than anything else you find, all I can say is this is what is true for this particular vehicle. Yours might be different. Okay, so let's take the caliper off first. And to do that, the very first thing is, here's the brake wear sensor. It just slides off easy enough. And the other part of the brake wear sensor is there's just a little rubber cap here on the bleeder that holds it in place that just pops off. Then this is a 13 millimeter, and this is 35 Newton meters, 13 millimeters, 35 Newton meters. The backer bolt on this one in this vehicle is 17 millimeters. Apparently a lot of vehicles are 15, but this one is 17. And this is too thin in here for a standard wrench. So you need to get a 17 millimeter thin, or just use a little bitty thin crescent wrench, and that'll be fine. Then here, there we go. There's one up here and there's one a little further down. It's easy enough when you get around the back. These are 15 millimeters, and you notice you need the socket with all the many points on it. And this is 115 Newton meters, 15 millimeters, 115 Newton meters. This will take a breaker bar to get off. And I shouldn't need to tell you if you've been doing this your whole life, but do not hang the caliper on the brake line. And there are videos out there with people that I would normally call reputable, and they're hanging the calipers on the brake line. Don't do that. You need to support this and keep the weight off that at all times. So real quick, just a really quick comment on the brake wear sensors. Here it is. And these are easy enough to break off. And I always try and make sure that we keep those in good shape just in case there's a problem with the new one. The brake wear sensor lives in two places on these vehicles, on the passenger rear and driver front. And that's why we're working on the passenger rear, so I can show you how to replace that. And also, I have noticed on the 2013 at least, and I'm finding it here to be true again on the 2016, the back brakes wear much faster than the front ones. So when the idiot light pops up on the dashboard, it's probably your rear brakes that need attention first. Okay, so I've taken that rear brake wear sensor off, and this one's still just fine. We had some pad left, but it's getting down there. The point I want to make here is that I'm just going to tuck that down out of the way while we do the rest of the project. Do not go in and just pull this off and disconnect it from everywhere you find it, because you're never going to get it reinstalled in the right spots. This is one of those things where you have to lay the new one right next to the old one and do it one connection point at a time, because otherwise you will never get the routing right. Just a comment on these 13 millimeters that come off. Some of your new parts kits will come with new bolts. If you get an OEM kit, it will come with those new bolts most likely. You notice that there's blue Loctite on these. So the new ones will come with blue Loctite as well. And then it's just a quick and dirty reinstall. Now what we're doing today is, I am sick and tired of the dust coming from these Rover pads and rotors. So I'm going aftermarket. And my kit does not have these. So I'm making sure that these are in good shape before I put them back in, and then we'll put a little blue Loctite on them. So all the bolts in the back are loose, but I always find it's easier to take the caliper off of the bracket now. And at least today, with the way this is behaving, I don't want to do this too much because I only have one hand. You can just get a screwdriver in here and this pries off very nicely. And then we can do that back and forth, and that'll come off. Okay, so the caliper is off, and this is how I support it so we can keep weight off the brake line. Just a real quick first look-see at the boot. The boot looks to be in really nice condition. And at least for me, the next thing to do is to clean these surfaces here. If you're coming from an OEM condition, those pads come with adhesive on the back, and the adhesive stays on here. So I will take this down, flip it around, and I will clean these off with brake parts cleaner. And I don't want brake parts cleaner on my rubber, obviously, so that's why we'll take it down, flip it around. And then once that's clean, we'll go outside and let the garage clear itself out. So here we are outside while the garage airs out. I've been cleaning this up with a wire brush. And as I said, we're doing aftermarket, and this particular kit comes with new rubber boots. So we're going to do that. But I do want to point something out. If you're going to do this on a Rover, these come out. That's pretty nasty. We want to change that out, of course. You notice that's a solid shaft. Going to this one. This one has a rubber gasket on it. So make sure that you do them one at a time to get them in the right place. And what we will do is obviously we'll take all that old grease out, and then we'll use some Q-tips on a stick, and we'll get that nice and clean in there before we put in the new grease. And the grease is a silicone-based grease, and that's in the parts list. Notice that these boots are not symmetric, okay? And here is the other way around. So the thin end goes up against the end of the nut, and then the other bit goes on the shaft. Okay, so that's done. Everything's clean. All the old grease has been removed, and we put some new stuff in. These things are my new best friends because you can go down in there and go around, take out the nasties and replace with the new stuff. Just don't lose the tip down in there because you don't want that going on. Okay, so here we are on the driver's side, and I've removed the shroud, and back here is the brake fluid reservoir. Just loosen the cap, so when you push that piston back, that brake fluid has a place to go. And of course, wrap that with a rag so that that doesn't go all over creation. And in case you were wondering, this is our Eco start-stop battery. Probably the single most hated thing in the whole truck. But that's easy enough to get to when you do that project. So over here, we have the puppy dog who likes to play ball. Good girl. This I got from the local parts store. You can rent these guys. Rented this years ago, never returned it, in which case they just keep the charge. So just one of these guys. I'll use this and that, and we'll just push the cylinder back. Okay, so you just tighten that down and it pushes the piston back. Just take your time when you're doing that. Remember, you're pushing all that fluid back up into the reservoir, and it can take a little bit. And I'm just reminded when I was young, you know, things like this, either they didn't exist or we didn't even know about them, because we sure didn't have them. We would just get a piece of wood and a C-clamp and kind of work it out as best we could. And that was always an adventure because everything was always kind of strange, but this works really nicely. Just take your time. So here we are back up front. We have now just pushed that piston back. The next step is to retighten the cap on the brake fluid reservoir. Two reasons for that. Probably the most important is that brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs water from the air, and we want to keep all the water out of that system we can. Even if we're going to bleed it later, we still need everything as dry as possible. And two, and I'm sure you've done this along with me, if you don't tighten it back on now, what's going to happen at the end of the day, you're going to pop in the truck, you're going to pump the brakes up, and you're going to get brake fluid all over creation because the cap won't be on. I've done it, You've done it. Let's not do it again. Okay, let's take the rotor off. So we have a little plug up here. It's a little piece of plastic. It comes out with a small screwdriver. Just pry it out. And this is a Torx down here. This is a T50, and it's 16 Newton meters. T50 at 16 Newton meters. Okay, so this has either got some corrosion on it or somebody has over torqued it when it went in the first time. So I just have one of these breaker bars and jammed it down against the floor so that this doesn't just spin when you try and undo that. And this is no problem now that the wheel is secured. Unfortunately, here on the passenger side, it is not behaving itself, and it is on there nice and hard. So there's a chance that it is dragging a little bit on the emergency brakes. So there's the adjuster, and you can see that it's at about 11 o'clock or so. And I can never remember the direction of turn on that for tighter or looser. I always have to figure it out as we go. So I will leave that to you, but I'm going to retract those pads and see if that helps. Okay, success. So a little WD-40 and some cautious persuasion with a ball peen hammer, being very careful not to booger up our lug nuts, and then a rubber mallet around the outside, and this is now loose and ready to come off. Okay, so I have gone in and we have cleaned all this up, and we've taken some emery cloth and gone around the spot where the rust was, and then I've taken some pressurized air and blown everything out. Now I do need to point out, and it's interesting, that in the mechanics manual, Rover specifically says do not use pressurized air. Clearly they are very concerned about the amount of dust that's going to be in the shop and that people are going to be inhaling. So if you, like me, are using pressurized air, let's use appropriate face masks and PPE to make sure we don't get exposed to this stuff. We need to pay attention to where our adjusters are. Again, here at about 11 o'clock, there's this adjuster for the parking brakes. And I will follow the procedure in Bodsy's Bible. And over here, here's our 4mm Allen wrench, and that is right at 3 o'clock. And at this spot, I'm gonna pop in the video I shot yesterday when we did the driver's side, because those locations are different on the driver's side. Okay, so I've popped over here to the driver's side real quick because I need to point this out, because driver's side and passenger side are different. So over here on the driver's side, here we have our 4mm Allen wrench, and that lives at about 10 o'clock. And then our other adjusting clicker down here lives at about 6:30 or so. So here's our rotor, and you notice right away that this is not Rover. As I stated earlier, I am really fed up with the amount of dust that Rover pads and rotors make, and we're going to give this a try. I have never in my life done aftermarket, and I hope we're making the right decision, but we will give these a try. But the reason I'm showing you this really is because the slots are in a particular direction, it does matter what size of the vehicle this goes on. So this goes on the passenger side to make sure we get things installed in the right locations. So we'll go ahead now and hit this with some brake parts cleaner on the back side and get that nice and clean. Okay, so at this point, let's start adjusting the parking brake. You can see that we've lined up on our adjuster in there so we can get at that. Right now, we need to understand the size on this nut because we will be following the procedure in Bodsy's Bible. Thank you very much for that. It's so amazingly helpful. So most Rovers have this nut and it's 32 millimeters. This truck is 35 millimeters. So again, you know, whatever they had laying around the shop floor that day. So I had to go out and buy a 35mm socket. So understand what's in your truck. Most are 32. This one is apparently 35. So what we're going to do is we are going to tighten the emergency brakes by clicking that until this torques at 60 Newton meters. So we're going to tighten this and then check the torque. And once it torques at 60, then this is tight enough. Then we back off 8 clicks. We make it 8 clicks looser. So let's finish adjusting the parking brakes. So down in there, that's a 4mm Allen, and that shaft is a 4mm Allen wrench that I've cut the end off of. Then that's a 4mm socket, and I'll go at that with a little socket wrench, my smallest socket wrench. And the instructions say to release that exactly 1/2 of a turn. Then to take a rubber mallet and to go around the outside and vibrate this. And there's an adjuster down there that will settle down to the vibration. Then once you've done that, you retorque it to 6 Newton meters, and that's the trick. And I have this little adapter, and this is probably the key to the whole project. This little adapter goes in my 4mm socket, and then on this end it's a 1/4 inch hex, and this 1/4 inch hex will fit in the torque tool that's in the tools list. And that is a tool, and you can buy that at various different torque settings. Just buy the one at 6 Newton meters, and that's about 20 bucks. Otherwise, if you want to, you can go out and you can buy a torque wrench with this kind of end on it. These are exquisitely expensive, and really it has proven to be very poor piece of equipment because the gearing in this head is just junk. So I would highly recommend you spend the 20 bucks on the torque tool. Just torque it up to 6 Newton meters then. Okay, let's reinstall the bracket. Again, there's 2 of these guys. These are 15 millimeters and 115 Newton meters. Okay, so the bracket's been installed. Time to install these, top and bottom. Top's already been done. The only trick with these is here and here. They control this motion, so it's got to be just right to make sure those clip in. Okay, let's compare old and new brake pads. Obviously that's the new one, and there's the old one. So we had not seen an idiot light because the wear sensor still looked fine, but it's getting down there, so that's good timing. Now I will put some silicone lubricant on all 4 of these locations. Just a little bit in the slides, a little bit on the tips of the brake pads, and then the brake pad goes in this orientation. Okay, so I have refit the caliper, and even with that piston driven all the way back, it just barely scooches over our nice new thick pads. Then we need to reinstall our bolts, and these are 13 millimeters and 35 Newton meters. 13 millimeters, 35 Newton meters, and I will put a dab of blue Loctite on those. And remember, you will need to hold that backer bolt. In this vehicle, that's 17 millimeters thin, or a thin crescent wrench will work. And we have made sure that our brake line is not twisted or kinked in any way. Okay, so the parking brake has been adjusted and we've reinstalled the little plastic plug. Now let's do the wear sensor. And we're gonna just follow this around. And it comes underneath here, slides in here, comes up here, goes back there, and this is it, back there, and you can come over on the other side of the shock, and you can see it. Now, I don't know why, but this Christmas tree connector was not put, there's a hole up there for it that was not installed. And then I turned around here so you can see it. This is the electrical connector. And this one you push way on the outer end here, right there. Push that, and then it'll toggle up on the inside end, and then that comes apart. I just need 2 hands to do that. Okay, well, it's time to move on to the front brakes, and as you can tell, I've already installed the new rotors. Remember that these are aftermarkets again, and these are slotted and drilled, and of course these are sensitive to what side they're on. So we're now on the passenger side, and the fronts are exactly the same as the rears, and actually once you've done the rears, these are very straightforward because of course there's no parking brake to worry about. So there are only 2 differences on the front. One difference being that you have 2 pistons instead of 1, but everything there is exactly the same otherwise. And then the only other difference is this bolt here, which is the mounting bolt for the bracket. This is 21 millimeters and a whopping 275 Newton meters. So 21 millimeters and 275 Newton meters. So here we are in the front, and I just want to show you how much pad we had left. This is the new pad, and I'm bringing the old pad here, right next to it. And you can see we have quite a bit of pad left on the old pad. So the rears do wear at a very different rate than the fronts. Now, one thing to point out is that on the fronts, we have this bit, and this is the proper orientation on the driver's side, and just make sure you have this in that same orientation on the passenger side as well. Okay, well, everything is back together here on the driver's side, and the last thing we need to do is replace the wear sensor. Remember, the wear sensor lives on the driver's front and passenger rear wheels. So same as the rear one, at this point in time we cannot connect it to the caliper because one of the clips goes over the bleed port and we still need to bleed the brakes. So we can replace the rest of the cable and leave that little bit for later. So the very first thing we need to do is, I'm being very slow here, I'm going to try and show you exactly where to go. Right there, you see it? Take out that clip. Then there's another clip that goes straight up, right there. And then there's another clip right here that goes straight up, and you use your favorite little tool to take those out. Those clips may or may not live to tell the story, so I've put the part number for new ones in the parts list. So once you get those clips out, you can reach up right about here and just pull that back, and then that will rest on the upper control arm, and it gives you just enough space to get in up underneath there. Okay, so just like on the rear wheel here on the front, there's a little slot down in there, and at the appropriate time the new wear sensor will clip in, and then the next part goes over the bleed port. Like I said, we'll leave those till later. And the routing here is much easier to see in person than it is actually on the phone. But it goes back and it makes a loop and it comes out, and it's this one. It comes up and it comes up here. It's this one, and it goes up under the fender skirt. So tracing this wire with the phone in one hand is actually much more difficult than just doing it in person. But here it is, and then it goes up here, and this slides into a little connector right here just to hold it in place. And then there's another one of those little sliders, and that has a connector right here behind the upper control arm. You cannot see that. Now be careful here. This is your height unit, and if you smash the sucker up, it's a couple $100, so you don't want to do that. So let me try and do this. So we pull the fender skirt back, and that's the electrical connector right there. Sorry, it's so bumpy. And I'm gonna change hands of the phone and see if I can get up in there. Here we go. And that's exactly the same connector we have on the back. You push in down here on the end, and it toggles up right there and releases. So that's actually easier in person than it looks like here. Good afternoon, how are you today? I hope things are well. So it's time for this old dog to learn some new tricks. We are going to flush out the brake fluid. And the last time I did this, thinking back, was in 1975. That was 47 years ago. And that was on my 1972 Austin Marina when I had to rebuild the brake cylinder. Can you imagine rebuilding a brake cylinder that's only 3 years old? Pretty amazing. That car was an adventure, let me tell you. So here we have 3 quarts of our brake fluid from Atlantic British. This should be more than enough. And at least as of when I purchased this, the prices for this at Atlantic British were way, way less than anywhere else. So thank you much for that. I really do appreciate it. Okay, so this is the electrical connector here on our brake reservoir, and just so you know how this works, you push down here and it toggles up and releases here, and then it slides off. This one is nice and easy to do, and it's nice and clean. And as you can see back there, it fits just right. So on we go. So I'm just following the instructions that come with the tool. First thing to do is remove the brake fluid from the reservoir. Use the syringe, that'll be in the parts list. And I sucked out as much as I could get. There's a filter in here that will not come out, the yellow bit. And so that limits how deep you can put your suction hose down there. But I got 500 milliliters out, give or take. And just so you know, there's the, see where that shadow line is right there? That's the amount of brake fluid that's left. This is some of the brake fluid that came out of the reservoir. So we can note that color and that hue. Let's look down in here. And there's the new stuff, ready to roll. Okay, so I put 2 quarts in our reservoir here, and I pumped it up to 10 pounds. And just so you know, there's where you can see where the line is there on our upper reservoir compared to where it was before. So let's go to the back and get started. Okay, so we are ready to roll back here. The bottle has been labeled as a recycle bottle, and please do recycle this appropriately. Do not put it in the environment. Do not put it in your motor oil, because it will destroy a whole batch of motor oil, and then that cannot be recycled itself. So here we are. This is a piece of 1/4 inch tubing that I had, and it's hooked up, and there's our little nut. This is 11 millimeters, and when we retighten it, it will be 10 Newton meters. 11 millimeters, 10 Newton meters. And let's try and do this right, and you can see what color this is when it first comes out. I have not opened this yet, so let's see what happens. It was a little on the dark side. So I'm just going to go ahead and open this up and let it go for a while. So while we're waiting for this to do its thing, we do this in the order of farthest from the master cylinder and work our way closest. So we're back here on the passenger rear end. Then we'll do the driver's rear end and the passenger front and then the driver's front. Well, what do you think? You think that is light enough in color? Let me raise this up so we can build some as it drains. And it's looking pretty good in color. I think we'll go ahead and call the passenger side done. Okay, so we have gone around and bled out all the old brake fluid, and actually I went around and did it twice, just for good measure. This is my second quart, and this is full to about here with brand new brake fluid that was poured out, put in the tool, and then put back in the bottle. So I actually used 1 1/4 quarts, and then this is 3/4 quart of brake fluid that's been opened. So what to do with that? Because we know that that will soak up water over time, and we really should not be using it. Okay, so these bleed ports all need to be torqued down. Again, these are 11 millimeters and 10 Newton meters. And then passenger rear and driver's front, we will install the wear sensor for the brakes. So let's start here at the caliper, just like the rear one. This goes right in there and snaps in. Then it comes up and it goes over the bleed port. Okay, so we've put the cap back on and we've gotten in and pumped the brakes up. Everything feels nice and solid and the pedal's nice and high, feels great. And here's our level. We just need to top it off and then we can move on to the next step. Well, good morning. How are you today? Here in the United States, it is the 4th of July, so happy Independence Day. Fireworks tonight. So I am here at Ellington Air Force Base. Well, it used to be Ellington Air Force Base, now it's Ellington Field, which is very close to my house. And we are going to bed in the brakes. Some brake pads want you to follow procedure when they're brand new. And I'm just going to read this really quick. So with these particular pads, and again, these are not Rover pads, these are aftermarkets because I was tired of the Rover dust and dirt. And they felt very good coming over here, so I think we're in good shape. So these say aggressive decelerations, 5, from 40 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour. Followed by 5 moderates, from 35 to 5. Followed by at least 5 minutes of driving without touching the brakes. And we have a nice loop here, we can do that, and hopefully the airport security won't pick me up. But barring anything unforeseen, this is the end of this video, and I hope you find all the detail very useful, and have a great day.